As shocking as this title might seem, it's 100% true. Now what you can see right here is the Greek word chrisma, which came from krio, which is the root for Christ. And the earlier word was krima. What is a krima? Anything smeared on thicker than a more oily substance, a cream. It's a medication. So Christs are drugs. They are salves. And that's how the word is used in the New Testament as well as the ancient Greek Pharmakon that dates back to about 1500 BC. This is really no problem for anybody unless you're a scapegoat Christian or a holy roller. Otherwise, it's not a problem for anybody. And if you are one of these guys, it's time to stop being one of them. So this is John 4:25. This is the Samaritan woman who was at the well, and Jesus walks up, and in the story, Jesus is there or walks up, and she says, "I know the Messiah," or "I know," my pointer, "I know the Messiah is coming, who's called Christ." So this has caused Christians to believe that Messiah and Christ are the same. They think this means anointed one, and they think this means anointed one. Well, this would make more sense to be anointed one, but this one here, not even close. It's actually a salve. So Jesus himself, by the way, calls himself a prophet. So a prophet's a man. So we should think about that as well. So if I'm in the interlinear Bible, which is what this is, where you've got the Greek word, the translation below, and the pronunciation above, if I press on Messias, I come to the Messias page in the interlinear Bible, which looks like this. You can see this word Messias is used in John 1 and John 4. I want to make it shorter for room space. The point here is that the word Messias refers to anointed one, which is synonymous with Christ. So they're saying that Christ is the Greek equivalent to the word anointed one. Now, is that true? So you'd have to check and see. I mean, most people don't check anything. They have no idea at all. So what we're going to do is press on or take Christos and put it into the Perseus Greek Word Study Tool, which is the most detailed online Greek-English lexicon with incredible detail. I mean, these classical philologists, guys, man, their attention to detail is quite stunning. So we're going to take the word Christos and put it into Perseus, and here it comes. You'll see what it is. It's a medicated salve that can be medical or mystical. You might say, well, that's not true. Well, it is true. It's true in John 9, a medical Christing, and it's true in Revelation 3, a mystical Christ. And there's four more Christing examples in the Bible that are 100% consistent with this language related to a Christ being a salve that could be medical or mystical. If you don't believe that, I mean, that's fine, but it's right before your eyes, and there it is. So if you're not a holy roller or a scapegoater and you can handle this, pretty obvious. It doesn't mean dump the Bible. It just means just dump the stupidity that people believe. And why not do once and for all, finally, if Christians could only actually do what Jesus said to do. Jesus said, become innocent like children, and then you get into heaven. So Christians should take this seriously because this is their guy and they don't listen to him. So if it's true that Jesus was involved with drugs, well, he's a Christos, which means he's a drug guy. He should really be called Pharmakos Christos. Pharmacos. So if you're a pharmacos, that would have meant that you would have trained your disciples to also be pharmacos, and that's what he did. Act 14, in the Acts of Philip, the disciple, smears Stachys' eyes with saliva from his sister's mouth, and this restores his sight. That is a Christing. That is a epikrisin, identical to the epikrisen that Jesus performed on the blind guy in John 9. Exact same language. So Jesus taught his disciples how to deal with the Pharmakon. They were all pharmacos. I just call Jesus, the Pharmakos Christos because he was the big guy. But that's what this language means, and it's very straightforward, very uncomplicated. And Jesus told us further and made it clear, or not Jesus, well, one, but otherwise it was Paul. Well, how do you get bit by a viper, shake it off like you weren't bit, no ill effects, don't die? So the people in Malta thought he was a god. Well, what he was a pharmacos, just like Jesus. He's a pharmacos. He takes antivenoms. I'll show you once we get there how this works. Mark 16, right on down to 18. Mark 16, 18. Jesus said, my followers who believe and are baptized, if that's you, go ahead and pick up a poisonous snake, get bit by it, and then drink some deadly poison and see what happens. You can only do that if you are part of the pharmacos squad, because you got to take antivenoms, antipoisons. That's the way it works. It's the only way it works. So we're being told by Jesus and shown by Paul that they're pharmacos. So we're going to now look at, we're going to take the root, krio, put it into Perseus, and we get this. Now I've numbered it 3, 4, 5, 6 because that shows you the Christings from the ancient Greek that are consistent with the time of Jesus, which would be 1500 or less years later. So what I'm going to show you now is, because when you get into the section in Perseus, you can click on a broader definition, which is what this is, or you can click on a smaller definition, although I blew it up big, which is what this is. So you can see how much smaller it is if I was to just, size it up right. So what does krio mean? What does krio mean? It means to touch the surface, to rub the surface, to wound the surface. Now some will say it means to anoint. Well, anoint came in 1300 AD, so 3,000 years before that, this word didn't exist. So this word didn't exist during the time of Jesus, and this is all Christians talk about. The word didn't exist. What was the word? Well, they didn't talk about it like Jesus was the anointed one. That language wasn't used. He was the Christed one, right? Or he was the Christ. Because of the Christings, because he's a pharmacos christos. So we can clearly see the situation that we have here. So we click on krio, and we get Christing applications as defined or consistent with the Bible. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on pharmakou. I'm going to click on pharmakou, and that will get me, well, I'm first going to get out of here. So I'll get out of here. Oops. Sorry, yeah, I should have said that. So this is what anoint means. To apply an ointment is a human act. God cannot do it. I mean, this just kills scapegoat and holy roller Christianity and puts the onus back on the Christian, because Jesus said you gotta do these things, be innocent, pure in heart, unselfish, that kind of thing. So we're going to come out of here for a second. Now what we're going to do is if I was online, I could click on pharmakou, and that would take me to the Pharmakon. And here it comes. Here comes the Pharmakon. So you can say pharmakou to Pharmakon. You can see salve. Do I have another thing here? There we go. Yeah. Oh yeah, there we go. We'll do it that way. So make some room. And so Pharmakon. So I clicked on pharmakou, got the Pharmakon. And now in Pharmakon, what do we see? It's a drug. What's a drug? A Christ salve is a drug. This is what Jesus is selling in Revelation 3:18. Jesus is selling kulurion. Why? In krise tous ophthalmus suina blepes. Yeah, it's a mystical Christing, completely consistent with the ancient Greek Pharmakon dating back 1,500 years before the time when Jesus allegedly lived. And the purpose of all these Christings is for salvation. Yeah, see, Christ is salvation, if you understand that Christ is a drug. So if you were to take BENGAY and rub it on your muscles, you Christed your muscles with BENGAY and achieve salvation from muscle pain. I know that just kills the holy roller and the scapegoaters, but that's just what the words mean. I mean, what are you going to do? You can either be honest, which is what Christians say they are, because Jesus is in them, right? So let's be honest. Well, let's just look at how honest they are if we check in with a couple of Bible scholars. So this is Danny Jones' podcast. He's interviewing Bible scholar Dan McClellan, who is in agreement with Wes Huff and Kip. They both agree on this. What do they agree on? Danny asks Dan, why do famous Greek authors like Euripides use Christ as a drug term? And Dan says, Euripides has no bearing whatsoever on the Gospel of Mark, Paul, or the Bible, and they don't use it in this way. So these are Bible scholars saying that the word Christ is not used in the capacity of a drug. Now, I just showed you it was. Well, I'll show you again. That's going to get big and busy here. You ready? So this is what Bible scholars don't know. I mean, it's unbelievable. You should check these guys out. They got tons of followers. This guy's got, I don't know, 50,000. This guy's got tons because of Joe Rogan. This is Kip Davis. These guys all have tons of followers. I got none. I don't really care. I'd rather people watch the videos. Just if you're interested in this, then I don't care about subscriptions. My thing isn't monetized anyway. So, but these guys don't know. These are Bible scholars who don't know what I just showed you here. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 apply directly to, ready? Revelation 3:18, John 9. Here you can see Luke, Acts, Hebrews. I forget where these guys are. And then here we have 1 John. 6 Christings in the New Testament, 100% consistent with the ancient Greek Pharmakon, just like Euripides said, and these guys, these Bible scholars, don't know it. Isn't that incredible? Believers and Bible scholars don't know what a Christ is. It's a salve, and it was a salve in the late Bronze Age, and it was a salve in the New Testament. Now, the word anointing is used a lot in the Bible. You can say I crossed off anointing because it doesn't show up until 1300 BC. I mean, Latin, this has come from French and Latin. Latin didn't even exist until like 700 BC, allegedly. Romulus in Rome or something like that. But anoint should not be the word that's used. That's why I crossed off anointing, because the word did not exist until 1300 AD. So when you just oiled yourself, that was called an anointing inappropriately. If you just oiled, so you had an oiling, you could call it an elephaning or an elepsosening. So these are the 9 occurrences where the word anointment was used to apply an oil as an oiling. The word anoint is used throughout all these Christings, but it's not right. It's inaccurate because the word didn't even exist until 1,200 years later. It was Christing. Christing involves drugs. Medicated salves. Right here. Christos is what? A medicated salve. So this is 100% true. You can Christ yourself with BENGAY and achieve muscle salvation if you are lucky, because BENGAY is a crema. Is a crema that you Christ to achieve salvation. Isn't that cool? But that's consistent with the language. And it should make no difference to you. Well, it will make no difference to you unless you're a scapegoat or a holy roller, because that kills your rap. Because according to Jesus, right, he told us that we have to do it ourselves.